You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I am Robin Morgan, and welcome to our season finale for this year. Rest assured we will be back in September with bells ringing and fists in the air. And rest assured that if in the meanwhile something really dramatic, I mean really dramatic happens, because these days something merely dramatic happens every 10 seconds, if something really dramatic happens in Washington, like impeachment actually begins, or Trump tries to fire all of Congress, or else he just decides, I'm losing all my money, I'm going to resign, I don't know. If something super major breaks, then we will charge back up here and throw together a show and announce it all over social media. Of course, those of you who subscribe through your podcast platforms will get it automatically through your mailbox, but one way or another, we will be there for you. Meanwhile, you can catch up on editions of the podcast that you've missed. My guest today for the conversation is rather spectacular. Doubtless you have seen her on television in news snippets from congressional Judiciary Committee hearings. You've seen her, for example, as the Congresswoman from Washington, the state of Washington, of course. She is Pramila Jayapal, the first Indian American in Congress. And she is a mixture of warmth and of steely resolve. And she's here today to tell us about the Judiciary Committee, which, of course, we've seen a lot and will see a lot more of. And she's also here to talk about her historic Medicare-for-All Bill. And we have an unusual news section, a retrospective in fast-moving blur, and, of course, the Surrealism Corner, and a quite personal fighting words. So let's get going inside the headlines. I was going to try for a retrospective of the past season or so of news, but it tumbled at such speed and volume that there was no way to process it. Massive news, like permafrost in the Arctic, is not so perma anymore. The giant subterranean ice blocks, frozen solid for thousands of years, are thawing 70 years earlier than predicted, and the mass migrations of entire populations moving across the planet as a consequence of climate change have only just begun, and they're going to stretch for centuries to come. And the political changes are almost minor in comparison, but not to those who suffer through them. Among the infinitesimally small items that will stay with us visually, those of the baby's dead arm around her father's drowned neck as their bodies washed up on the banks of the river Rio Grande, turned away for their flight of asylum from America. But there are signs of a species trying, insisting on survival. In Venezuela, in Hong Kong, in Brazil, people were in the streets fighting for democracy. Residents of Istanbul shocked Turkey's authoritarian president, Recep Erdogan, in electing a new mayor in open opposition to Erdogan's policies. Zhen Kuran continues running around her city, Guangzhou, in China, every single day to call attention to the case of her husband, a journalist and activist who disappeared into police hands in March. Zheng herself is one of 5 women detained by police in 2015 for having handed out flyers against sexual harassment of women on subways and buses. The official charge, of course, was for picking quarrels and provoking trouble, a crime punishable by 3 years in prison. The 5 women became known as the Feminist Five, had been virtually unknown at the time of their arrest, but their arrest turned into an international scandal. And she learned from that because the pressure on China made China release them after 37 days. And so this time, when her husband disappeared, and she tried everything she could to get answers from the authorities and got nothing, she began running as a way to draw the world's attention. I couldn't even attempt any halfway retrospective without revisiting our periodic Still Happening Connect the Dots feature. So, still happening. Flint, Michigan is mostly still reliant on bottled water, since they cannot trust the pale orangey brown stuff that comes out of the tap, and in a week or so new indictments are expected to come down, hopefully, wishfully, including the governor who started it all. And Michigan is still mostly a black community. Connect the dots. Still happening. Puerto Rico has areas, about 6%, which are still lacking or have only periodic electrical power and water after 2017's catastrophic Hurricane Maria. Trump says Puerto Rico was handled fantastically, incredibly well. He threw them some paper towels. And anyway, it doesn't deserve any better because it was in some debt, due to being sucked dry by plantation interests owned by large companies, but hey, never mind. Most mainland U.S. citizens don't even know that Puerto Ricans are full American citizens like themselves. Connect the dots. Americans in Puerto Rico and on the mainland are horrified at images of children along the border with Central America, crying with hunger, wearing 2-days-old dirty diapers, lacking food, soap, toothbrushes, any care, and lacking their own parents who are waiting for them here in the United States. Still happening. Most of the shelters, as we have reported before on this program, are outsourced by this regime to organizations run by Christian ministries of one or another kind, some of which are decent, some not. Some are also large conglomerate corporations that run anti-choice organizations, adoption agencies, separation policies, and so-called shelters for the children that have been separated, anti-choice organizations, adoption agencies. Connect the dots. Do we have a child marketing system here? Still happening, although we didn't think it was about to stop just because of splendid Me Too and splendid Time's Up, did we? E. Jane Carroll's clear, well-documented account of Donald Trump's rape of her in the mid-1990s, and New York Times editor Dean Baskett, who took over his post after the firing of Jill Abramson, first woman to hold that position. Abramson was reportedly fired from the Times for her, quote, stridency. Baskett, when asked why the 23rd accusation of sexual offense and first flat-out accusation of rape by a sitting president was not worthy of being front-page news, responded that the newspaper had, quote, underplayed the report by being overcautious. Close quote. Connect the dots. I could ramble on retrospecting for the entire show, but relax, I won't. We will go forward from here on in. That is, after 3 quick, actually gladdening glances back. One is a still happening picture. Still happening all this time. But hey, just as well. It's of a man. He occupies a single 7 by 13-foot cell with a 10-foot ceiling near the infirmary. He stands for account 4 times a day, 2 a.m., 12:30 p.m., 6:30 p.m., 9 p.m. Breakfast at 7 a.m., lunch at 11 a.m., dinner at 4:55 p.m. He is called by his number, NN86 87. He used to be called Bill Cosby. The next is a cause for a real party. Friend, sister, poet, feminist, author, activist, playwright, musician, several times guest on this program, Joy Harjo, member of Muskogee Nation, which is to say the Creek people, has been named Poet Laureate of the United States. She is the first Native American Poet Laureate, and I am so proud for her and so happy about this. Joy, aptly named, is 68, is the author of a number of books, including Crazy Brave, She Had Some Horses, and How We Became Human, as well as recordings that you can find via her website and online. Listeners, read her, hear her, and find our conversations with her in the WMC Live archives online. And last, this look back. Because we made it happen. We won the elections in 2018 that had consequences, that enable us to look forward to July 17th, when the news event we've been trying so hard to bring about will actually take place. Robert Mueller will testify before the American people in Congress. Yes, it took a subpoena. 2 subpoenas. Yes, it might not be as dramatic as we expect. In fact, it may not be everything everyone hopes for. But this is the beginning of getting the real information out to people who will actually listen to it because it's on television. And you and I made this happen. From way down inside the headlines, burrowing away, we did it. It's time for our first break, but I just have to ask, in a country and a time when the ostensible president, when faced with his umpteenth accusation of sexual assault, himself states, "Oh, she's lying just to promote her new book," and then follows that statement with another statement saying, "Anyway, she's not my type." Both statements quite surreal. Do we need to rename our country the United States of Surrealism? And do we need a Surrealism Corner? I guess we do. And that's why it's coming right up. Subscribe to this program on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. Follow us on Twitter at WMC Live, like our Facebook page at facebook.com/WMC Live, and visit us at WMCLive.com for more information about our show and our guests.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And we are back to find ourselves already in the Surrealism Corner. One thing you can always rely on in the universe, astrophysicists say, is entropy. The other, Robin says, is irony. Without irony, life would be one long, unsufferable, unwakeable up from nightmare spent in Bob Jones University. Oh, irony, dear irony. Even scientific research dedicated to, say, environmental solutions can turn out ironic. For example, laboratories create risks from hazardous chemicals and generate an enormous amount of plastic waste. One biologist devoted to reducing this footprint estimates that bioscience and medical research alone are responsible for 2% of all the plastic junked annually. Oops. 8 million people are part of Ravelry.com, a social network for knitters and crocheters. The platform made headlines recently after it announced that it was banning any talk of Trump and his regime in order to preserve an environment free from hateful expression. Quote, support of the Trump administration is undeniably support for white supremacy. Close quote, period. The announcement read. Good for the pearlers, I say. Last November, female Republican membership in the House declined by 10 to a total of just 13, as compared with 89 Democrats. The Republican side of the House chamber became a sort of sea of men. We need to prove that we're bigger than a party of old white men. That's what Olivia Perez Cubas, a spokeswoman for WFW, Winning for Women Political Action Fund, said. That's a political action fund for the GOP women. Part of why WFW exists, she said, is to prove that this party is bigger than just old white men. Well, yes, Olivia, except that Christina Reynolds, who is the spokeswoman for Emily's List, the 34-year-old organization dedicated to identifying and endorsing Democratic women who support abortion rights, answered, we understand the challenges, and we understand it takes work, and we're glad that they're focused on it. But, she added, they're going to run into trouble because they're trying to do this in a party that is actively going after women's rights and which has actively dismissed women's rights. Period. Close quote. And last. Okay, Facebook, which is under, federal investigation over its privacy practices and so much else, is now launching a cryptocurrency. It's called Libra, and it's scheduled to launch in the next 6 months to a year. The company hopes to raise $1 billion to support its launch, which it says could drive more e-commerce on its services and could boost ads on its platforms. And what do you think? What could possibly go wrong? It's surreal. We have to take another brief pause, but if you've seen only snippets of the House of Representatives Judiciary Committee questioning of, say, Supreme Court Justice nominees, for example, Kavanaugh, well, you've been blown away by Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, whose style combines ice and fire, just as her experience spans having been a civil rights leader and a financial analyst, with a through line of feminism and anti-racism and immigration reform. She's her district's first woman to be a member of Congress and the first Asian American to represent the state of Washington in Congress, and she is coming right up. The Women's Media Center, founded in 2005 by Jane Fonda, Gloria Steinem, and myself, is a progressive, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization working to make women visible and powerful in media. You can learn more about the WMC at womensmediacenter.com.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back to the conversation. This week, the conversation, to my honor, is with Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal. She is the first Indian American woman to serve in the House of Representatives. Before entering electoral politics, she was a Seattle-based civil rights activist, a movement person, who served as executive director until 2012 of One America, a pro-immigrant advocacy group originally called Hate Free America, which she herself had founded following the 2001 September 11th attacks. She was born in Chennai, India, to a Malayali Indian family and was raised in Indonesia and Singapore. She immigrated to the United States in 1982, earned her bachelor's degree from Georgetown and an MBA from Northwestern, then worked with Payne Webber as a financial analyst after graduating, and worked in sales and marketing with a medical company before ultimately moving into the public sector in 1991. Jayapal served on the Mayoral Advisory Committee in Washington that negotiated Seattle's $15 minimum wage and co-chaired the mayor's police chief search committee, which resulted in the unanimous selection of the city's first woman police chief. She then ran for and won a seat in the Washington State Senate, where she sponsored a bill creating a transportation department pre-apprenticeship program targeting women and people of color, and also a bill to test and track thousands of police department rape kits. In the House of Representatives, she has been a co-sponsor of many things, legislation intended to make public colleges and universities tuition-free for most families and to significantly reduce student debts, and a series of bills aimed at promoting transparency and eliminating conflicts of interest in the Trump White House. And on June 29, 2018, Jayapal participated in Women Disobey and the sit-in at the Hart Senate Office Building to protest the Trump administration's zero-tolerance approach to illegal immigration. The protest resulted in the arrest of over 500 people, including the Congresswoman. She said she was, quote, proud to have been arrested for protesting the administration's inhumane and cruel policy, close quote. It is my privilege to welcome Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal to Women's Media Center Live. Pramila, dear wonderful Congresswoman, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Robin. It's always so good to talk to you.
Well, it's a real honor and a personal, just such delight to have you here. I know the time is limited, so we're going to plunge right in. First of all, you are the first Indian American woman to serve in Congress, and you're part of the leadership of the Democrats in Congress, which of course now means control of the House. Congratulations. You're the senior whip. You're the vice-ranking member of the Congressional of the Committee on the Budget, which is where all things start and stop. And you're the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. You're very busy these days, huh?
I am very busy, and I did give up the vice ranking of the Budget Committee. There was just a little too much going on, but being the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Committee has been incredible and really an opportunity to build our progressive voice in a very intersectional way on so many issues. So it's been a real privilege and honor.
Well, after 2016, after 2018, the Congress actually starts, no parity yet for women or people of color, but it begins to start to look like America. And that's so heartening. But Pramila, you're also co-chair and co-founder of the Climate and Environmental Justice Task Force. So let's take a minute and talk about that. There's so many things I want to get to before the biggies, which are your Medicare-for-All Bill and, of course, what you're now these days most known for is your seat on Judiciary. So let's touch base at least on climate and environmental justice to start.
Yeah, this was last cycle, when I first came into Congress, there were a number of us, there weren't as many people of color, but we did have some folks of color who were elected along with me, Nanette Barragan from California and Don McEachin from Virginia, each of us representing a different minority caucus, Don with the CBC, the Black Caucus, Nanette with the Hispanic Caucus, and me with the Asian Pacific American Caucus. And the three of us, all three of us, very concerned about environmental justice and how do we talk about the effects of climate change, really centering on the disproportionate burden that low-income communities and communities of color are facing, and how do we make sure that their voices are front and center in any solutions that we bring to climate change. And so we formed this caucus on environmental justice, and we did several briefings in the last session. We put together a package of bills that would establish an Office of Environmental Justice in the President's office that would make grants available specifically for communities, for example, that live right by the highway and have to deal with disproportionate asthma incidents, communities that live in coastal areas that are being flooded by sea level rise. I mean, different ways in which Flint, Michigan, the water crisis that is, that is so prevalent, poisoned water that is so prevalent from not addressing our infrastructure needs. And also, talk about diversity within the environmental movement and how if we're going to really build the kind of momentum we need to take on the fossil fuel companies, we have to have a movement that includes a very wide range of communities and certainly the voices of those most affected. And I think you saw that with Standing Rock,
Yes.
So inspirational. And I think that that's really what we were trying to get at.
And segue from that, if you don't mind, into you're all over immigration. You're co-chair of the Women's Working Group on Immigration Reform. You're chair of the Immigration Task Force, and co-chair and you're border security, the subcommittee on immigration and border security on the judiciary. So talk about the agony that we're going through in terms of the border.
Well, it has been incredibly difficult to see that there are indeed humanitarian crises happening, but those crises have been manufactured by Trump and his administration.
Yes.
Heartless, cruel manufacturing, ripping parents away from their children, stopping legal asylum seekers from seeking asylum through the so-called metering process that basically prevents anybody from seeking asylum, which is not only a right under international human rights law, but also under our own domestic laws. And then this, insane focus on a vanity wall, which does absolutely nothing to address the crisis of migration around the world, and the need for us to really have humane immigration reform that allows people to come into the country and also brings people out of the shadows here in the United States. And so it has been, I was on the front lines of the family separation crisis, as you know.
I do know.
First member of Congress to go into a federal prison and talk to over 226 men and women who had been separated from their kids, many of whom were asylum seekers, talking about hearing their babies cry in the next room and not being able to go to them, not saying goodbye, not knowing where they were. It was horrendous. And when I sit on the Judiciary Committee and I see my Republican colleagues refuse to call out the demonization of immigrants, it is incredibly painful as an immigrant myself, but of course as somebody who's worked on immigration for so long. What I will say, though, is we did pass, we had a very long 10-hour hearing or 12-hour hearing in the Judiciary Committee on the most progressive DREAM Act and Temporary Protected Status Act ever. And, we sat through a slew of horrific Republican amendments, and we held every single Democrat together to vote against those amendments. And then we passed it on the House floor, the Dream and Promise Act.
I know. That was so moving. Yeah, it was. My God, 3-4 children that we know of, I emphasize, have died in U.S. custody at the border. well separated from there. I mean, it is such a nightmare that it's happening in the United States that there still is an element of disbelief, and yet it's real. It's hideously real.
It is very real, and Chairman Nadler and Zoe Lofgren, who's the chair of the Immigration Subcommittee, and the vice chair, and Mary Gay Scanlon, who's the vice chair of the Judiciary Committee, we asked for an investigation. It's actually 5 children who have died just since December.
Oh, my God.
And understand that there was not a single death of a child in the many years preceding this.
That I know.
And so it really is horrendous. And, the administration is asking us for more money, and we want to make sure that and they're saying it's for humanitarian crises, but at the same time, they're taking billions of dollars from other places and putting it towards a wall. They should be able to take care of these kids. Instead, Trump just announced that he's stopping English classes and soccer classes and other things. What's next? Water and food for these kids?
Probably.
It's really cruel.
Yeah, no, it's unbelievable. Nadler is my congressperson, and I think he's been doing an extraordinary job, I must say. Tell us, do the Republicans this is an aside, but an important one, do they, behind the scenes, do they turn human, at least some of them? Do they say, I know this is terrible, but I don't dare? I mean, do they make any excuse? Do they roll their eyes ceilingward? Or do they hold position and say, no, this is right, this is fine, this is okay with me?
Some of them that I am closer to will occasionally say to me, yes, it's terrible. I don't like the demonization. I don't like the xenophobia. I believe immigrants make this country stronger. But, this is who Trump is, and we're never going to change him. And I say that.
But you can change yourself.
Right. That cannot be the reason you stay silent.
That's right.
But, they're all in Camp Trump, and they don't speak out. Now, I will say, on the Dream and Promise Act, 7 Republicans voted for the Dream and Promise Act.
Right.
With every single Democrat. So I give those 7 credits for voting for that bill. But we have to do so much more. The Republican Party has to decide who they want to be. And I think they've decided they want to be Trump's Republican Party and not a Republican Party that we have seen in the past. I mean, remember, Robin, that, Ronald Reagan, George Bush, even though we didn't like some of those presidents at the time, they embraced immigration.
My God, of course.
They never, tried to make it seem like every problem in the world was because of immigrants who are rapists and murderers, which
of course not.
Of course what this president is doing.
They would be considered, I don't know what, far out, sold out, impossible people by the Jim Jordans of today. I mean,
that's right.
They would be considered completely off the map. Now that we're into judiciary, let's get there, and then we'll close with something happy like the Medicare-for-All Bill, which is going to change history, and it's your bill. Okay, with the I word. Where have we been? Where are we going? I mean, I think I'm one of those people who has stood by Pelosi, knowing that she's very smart and she has her eyes on the ball, and it will take time. But it also is true that I lived through Watergate, and I was one of the people eager for impeachment to move, but knowing we needed to bring the country along. And of course, what brought the country along was the hearings. So it's like, which do you put first, the cart or the horse? And in this case, particularly since they are absolutely astonishingly defying Congress's right to subpoena power, just saying, nah, we're not coming. What do we do, in that situation? How do we get around it? Do we take them to court? Do we fine them? What do you,
well,
help?
I mean, you've raised the most important pieces of this. So first of all, the Mueller report, 2-year investigation, extensive investigation, 2 volumes of the Mueller report that I think every one of your listeners really should read front to to back. It reads like a novel. You couldn't make this stuff up.
I agree.
First volume about Russian interference, targeted Russian interference into our elections to elect Donald Trump, successful interference in our elections, and the Trump campaign's participation in activities that were not coordinated per se, according to Mueller's report, but that they certainly knew would affect the outcome of the election.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think is, incredibly important. Second volume about obstruction of justice. 10 potential counts of obstruction of justice laid out by the special counsel. He did not recommend impeachment because he decided that he would stand by an Office of Legal Counsel opinion that says that a sitting president can't be indicted.
Right.
Now, for a crime. Now, that legal opinions are issued all the time. They're challenged in court. They are not the gold standard, but he decided he would stand by that, and that is why he didn't make a conclusion on whether or not the president had committed a crime. He did not. He said if they had found enough evidence that the president did not obstruct justice, then he would have said that. But they did not find that, so he did not say that. In other words, there is real evidence that the president obstructed justice.
I wish he hadn't used double negatives. That's all I wish.
I know. Especially as English majors, we hate that. Right?
Yes, we do.
But what I will say is that, we have tried very hard to, on the Judiciary Committee, to go through every step possible to get this information. Subpoenas. We, have called witnesses that were willing to testify until the White House told them they couldn't testify. The White House has exerted sweeping executive privilege over these documents, which we don't think even makes any sense because they had released executive privilege initially. And then they said, we're now claiming total immunity for senior presidential advisors like Don McGahn, so that he can't testify. So what you see is this compounding of a complete and utter
stonewalling
contempt, stonewalling by the president of at least a co-equal branch of government. I mean, Robin, I like to think we're first, right? Because we're Article 1.
You're first in the Constitution. That's correct.
Correct. And so, we're co-equal branches of government, and that is part of what makes our democracy strong, is there's oversight between these three co-equal branches of government. The president is now saying, nope, you can't have oversight. I'm a king.
Well, what do we do?
And I can do whatever I want. Well, we will be voting on contempt citations on the floor, and we will be authorizing civil charges for those contempt citations. But I really believe the time has come to start an impeachment inquiry. Now, understand that is not an impeachment vote.
I do.
However, it gives us the ability to open formal impeachment proceedings so that we can use our Article 1 powers to get the information that we need to get, the facts that we need to follow to their conclusion.
There are additional powers. There are additional powers. There
are. And as you said, when the Nixon impeachment hearings started, I believe that the number of people, the percentage of Americans that thought Nixon should be impeached was 19%.
That's correct.
By the end of those hearings, it was so clear what had happened and that he needed to be impeached that they never went through the impeachment proceedings because he resigned.
That's right.
And we now, 41% of the country believes Trump should be impeached.
Right, yeah.
So we are in a very different time.
We are in a very different time. We are also in a time where the Republicans back then were semi-sane, halfway sane anyway, and these don't seem to be, unfortunately. It's the death of a once great party. But still, this is what it will take. It takes daily television and the drama of that, and people person saying what they've already testified to for the public to wake up and understand. I only have you for a few more seconds, and I want desperately to touch on two more things, and they're both related. One is to thank you for your recent incredibly courageous op-ed in the New York Times about the right to abortion and your own history. and the other is to talk,
Thank you.
however briefly, about your own most important of all, Medicare-for-All bill. We can walk and chew gum at the same time, and you're doing it. Talk a little bit about both before I know you have to run.
Well, I'll just say quickly, I have not felt the need to talk about my own personal abortion story before. In fact, I felt sort of resentful that I might feel like I should do it. But I really felt like it was time, given all the work that Republicans are doing to undo this constitutional right of pregnant people to have to make their own choices. And so I did write this op-ed, and I hope that it has been helpful to people across the country in understanding why it is so important to let us be the judges of what happens in our bodies. And I think that the more we tell our stories, I also respect people who don't want to do that, but the more we do share these stories, the more clear it becomes that this is a universal red and blue state issue. Yes. And that the majority of America believes that we should have the right to make these decisions, and nobody should be able to take that away from us. So, stay tuned for more on that. But I think I just want to be I want the story to be in service to something, and it feels like this is the time for it. On Medicare for All, I am just incredibly excited. We just had the Ways and Means hearing on Medicare for All. This is the third hearing, Robin, on this bill, on my bill, the first time in history of the House of Representatives that we've had hearings on Medicare for All or a single payer system. And we've had 3 in a month.
Wow.
So, we have been working really hard. The activists and advocates across the country have been amazing. By the way, the Medicare for All bill does repeal the Hyde Amendment, just to make that very clear. And it does cover reproductive choice for everybody. But it is so past time for us to have a system where everybody in this country gets to have health care when they need it. They get to have preventive care, mental health, vision, medical, dental. This is an expanded and improved Medicare system that would serve every single person in the country. No more for-profit insurance payments, no more, having an out-of-network or doctor or hospital and a surprise billing for thousands of dollars. No more GoFundMe programs, crying for help for your cancer treatment or your insulin drugs. We also have a provision that would cut pharmaceutical drug prices by 40%. And we estimate that the average American family would spend 14% less than they currently spend on healthcare, and they would actually get comprehensive care.
Oh, my
God.
God.
So we're very excited about it.
No more fear. No more fear.
No more fear.
No more fear. Oh, my God. I remember that once Nina Simone was asked, what would freedom be to you? And she thought a while, and she simply said, no more fear. And that would be the actual name for this bill. Oh, my God.
That's beautiful.
Pramila, thank you. As usual, you are unique in that you translate ideals into reality. I am so grateful to you, and so many join me in just being grateful that you exist and that you're in Congress and that your generous heart and brilliant mind are in the service of real people. And ending real suffering and enabling real vision to address real ills. Thank you for all that you do for women and men and children and trees and other living things. And thank you for being with us today. It's been such an honor, and it's such a gleeful thing to think that the Women's Media Center Progressive Women's Voices program had the tiniest iota in helping in the slightest way to your blazing star. It's a thrill.
Well, absolutely. And you and your work have been an inspiration to me and so many millions of women across the world. So it is a great honor for me to be on the show with you and just say thank you. Thank you for blazing the trails before.
Take care.
And allowing us to have this voice too.
We have to take our final break. But could we pause for just a second here and realize that in the most powerful country on the planet, in one of the two most powerful political parties, in the second position of leadership. Someone like Pramila Jayapal holds that position, and that's a sign of tremendous positive advance for the species. I mean, it really is. Anyway, we'll be back in just a moment with some fighting words.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, it's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Talk radio with a brain.
And welcome back to some fighting words. This has been a painful season, while all the old hegemonies mass together to fight what is coming to birth in our republic, in our world. But ironically, we are living through a golden age of journalism. You know, sometimes the press only wakes up from sluggish, wet dreams of tabloid gossip and lazy reprinting of government handouts, while the investigative reporters on the lower floors start smoking again in wild frustration, only wakes up when its stringers in far countries get murdered, and then in nearer countries get jailed, and then even at home get threatened with prison. Sometimes journalists get cranky when the president of their own country calls them the enemy of the people. Real cranky. Sometimes only then do they wake up. Sometimes only then do they really get to work. We are so damn lucky to be living in a period like that. I never thought I would be, in any sense of the word, a journalist. I never even thought I wanted to be. I knew I always loved words, in any shape or form, yes, in any use, from a grocery list to an epic poem. I'd read about the great journalists, but they seemed to be correspondents, like Ernie Pyle, tough guys. That is, until Roz Russell in the movie His Girl Friday, and then I thought I would die with longing to be her. But once I discovered poetry, all bets were off, and I knew what I'd been born for. And then fiction, and then politics, wow. And I was off with what in the 1940s and 50s they called, redundantly, creative writing. As if even in a grocery list I thought there were any other kind of writing. Think about it. But in order to sustain a passion with words, especially poetry, stories, novels, and essays, I found myself acting snobbish, and I say this to my shame, looking down on journalism, which they thought was not creative writing. In my female youth, journalism meant to me women's magazines, too, and they were considered second-class journo, regarded as how-tos, how to dress, cook, keep house, and please him. It took years of feminism before I understood they were really survival manuals, womanuals, on home economics, environment, child raising, household maintenance, interior design, nutrition, sexuality, family psychology, child development, food storage, and 100 other domestic skills that social science hadn't yet discovered, psychologists hadn't yet invented, and gay men hadn't yet popularized on TV. That was decades before I would come to work as a book editor and later an editor at a magazine called Ms., and finally as the editor-in-chief of Ms. And to the extent that today I am able, such as I am, to call myself a member of the press, it is due to Suzanne Braun-Levine, for 18 years the founding editor and the shaper of Ms. Magazine, who then went on to become the distinguished editor-in-chief of Columbia Journalism Review, and after that the author of numerous successful books. I don't want to mislead. My primary identification, if any is necessary, is as a poet. It's why I'm fond of breathing. Still, in an age when facts are as abused as women, then journalism really comes into her Amazon warrior queen self, and I'm proud to fall in as a foot soldier in her ranks. Go back far enough in history, and you'll find that poets were the original reporters anyway. They used rhyme because rhyme made what they had to say easier to remember. They traveled from town to village to city, imparting news they had heard in a former place, and they became discerning about which stories were accurate and which were not. So there isn't such a dichotomy between the poet and the press, after all. Either way, all I have are words to work with. I'd say that words are my weapons, except that there's only one use for weapons: to kill. Words, more accurately, are my tools, because tools have many purposes: to attack, to defend, to build, to signal, and many more. How lucky I am that all I have are words to work with. How grateful I am that words are all I have. Those are my fighting words. Add yours on Twitter, and remember to tag us at WMC Live and use the hashtag Fighting Words. And that's it for our show today and for this season. We'll be off until the fall in the Northern Hemisphere, but see you in September. You can follow me on Twitter at @TheRobinMorgan and on Facebook at facebook.com/RobinMorgan. Check out my blog at robinmorgan.net and find my latest book, Dark Matter, wherever books are sold. You can pre-order my forthcoming in the fall novel, Parallax, which will be out in October. Opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the Women's Media Center. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. Executive producer as well as founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. WMC president and co-executive producer of this program, Julie Burton. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. Have a great summer if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, and a good winter if in the Southern. And join us again in September on Women's Media Center Live.